So here we have the Tisas M1911A1 US Army and my 1945 manufactured Remington Rand. Right off the bat, we can see these guns look like siblings. Besides the darkened finish and wear on the Remington Rand, the lines and silhouettes of these two pistols are virtually identical. My Remington Rand most likely has an Arsenal refinish, so it may not even be totally correct for a wartime finish. The Tisas, however, has a finish similar to Cerakote that looks and feels very close to real Parkerizing. The grips of the Tisas are new old stock government issued grips that I've added, and it appears there was either some variance in the color of these grips, or the plastic may be darkened over time. The only major aesthetic difference between these two pistols is the ejection port. As you can see, on the Tisas, the ejection port is cut about 1/8 of an inch lower than the original. Besides that, the ejection ports are pretty much the same. The barrel of the old gun is marked different, but it isn't the original barrel anyway. Moving forward, our front sights are slightly different as well. The Tisas has the older style front sight that was featured on guns built from 1924 to 1941, whereas my Remington Rand has the more common style of sight that was featured on guns built from 1942 onwards. The rear sights are basically identical. The hammer of the Tisas looks to replicate the style of what Colt would have produced. My Remington Rand appears to have a later style Ithaca hammer. At the heel of the grip, we see there's a slightly different angle cut near the mainspring housing. Also, the mainspring housing of the original has a small groove or indentation under the lanyard loop. The bottom of the Tisas' mainspring housing is completely flat, and the lanyard loop is also slightly larger. The most critical difference down here is that the magazine well of the Tisas is beveled, while the original is not. The triggers seem to be the same length and have similar serrations, however the Tisas has lines that are cut much shallower. The safety is similar and fits the overall look of a GI-style safety, but it's a little shorter and the serrations have a finer cut to them. The mainspring housing has 7 serrations instead of the 8 that are present on my Remington Rand, however 7 is correct for several manufacturers to include Colt in the later years. Pretty much everything else past this point is exactly replicated. The slide catch, magazine release, grip safety, barrel bushing, recoil spring plug, and other small parts all look exactly like their government-issued counterparts. However, many of these small parts are made using metal injection molding rather than the forging process the government specifications would call for. Make of that what you will. The only differences left are the markings. On the port side of the Tisas, the slide reads Model 1911A1 US Army, while the Remington Rand has a Colt slide with the usual Colt roll marks. You can see the old gun has several markings all around the trigger guard. On the slide, there's a proof mark and a small line for indexing your rear sight that is not present on the Tisas. On the starboard side, we have a mark behind the grip, marks around the trigger guard, property marks, serial number, and the M1911A1 US Army mark. Tisas has actually moved some marks around since they released the new SKU this year. They've hidden the Zig M1911 Turkey mark under the dust cover, and the serial number is now below the import mark. This is the same area where an original would have the serial number under the US property mark. Having those stamps fill that area makes the gun look much more correct in my opinion, so that change gets an A+ from me. As I've said before on this channel, this gun really does faithfully recreate the World War II era M1911A1, and at its price point, this is a no-brainer to satisfy anyone with a 1911A1 shaped hole in their heart. Thank you for watching my Tisas 1911 comparison video. A lot of the information on the small parts comes from a website called coolgunsite.com. I'll put a link below if you want to check it out.